Hello, I'm Jeff Thomson, President and CEO of IMA, the Institute of Management Accountants, and it's a pleasure to be here today for the fourth installment of our Series for the Future. You know, my last installment of Series for the Future, we talked about the profession and the attractiveness of our great accounting and finance profession to Generation Y and Generation Z millennials. In the face of robotics and automation and other pressures on our profession, is this still an attractive profession? And in that segment, I tried to make a case very passionately and with data that yes, for millennials, for Gen Y, Gen Z, our profession is even more attractive now than ever in the face of automation and robotics, simply because as robotics and artificial intelligence automate away more of the routine, repeatable tasks, it frees up more time for smart humans to employ critical thinking skills, business judgment, data analytics, visualization, do a better job at telling the story to management, shareholders, boards of directors. And I hope I made that case. However, in this segment of Series for the Future, I want to talk about the other generations. What about them? What about Generation X and baby boomers? Is this still an attractive profession for the more seasoned professionals like me and perhaps some of you? What skills are kind of foundational and portable across all generations? And my basic conclusion is this, and one way to highlight my point is you may have seen in accounting today reports like and captions like Excel is dead, and then a later one that says reports of Excel's demise are much exaggerated. So look, as it relates to automation and technology and artificial intelligence, blockchain, there's an awful lot of hype out there. There's definitely some reality, but there's also some hype. And you know, that caption, the death of Excel is greatly exaggerated, could also apply to our great profession for all generations, meaning the death or demise of our great profession is definitely greatly exaggerated for all generations. However, the call to action is all generations must upskill to be relevant and to have great influence in the face of clear automation, clear advances in technology like blockchain, robotics process automation, cognitive computing, and more. So although we have a great profession and a great future for all generations, the upskilling must occur, and I'll talk about some of the competencies. But foundational to success in increasing our relevance and influence in the face of digitalization is the upskilling that I talked about. And again, when you think about seasoned professionals and you think about things that artificial intelligence and robotics process automation can't do, like critical thinking, wide-ranging business judgment, optimization. Now, of course, machines can do some of that, but they can't do it all. So the more that we as humans, for all generations, including Generation X and baby boomers, apply the human element, as I said earlier, the critical thinking, the business judgment, the business acumen, the emotional intelligence, the data analysis, things of that sort, it will put us in a much, much better position to optimize and use machines as an asset like good management accountants do today. So let's talk a little bit more about these competencies, as I said, apply equally to millennials as they do to more seasoned professionals. Just this past week, mid-June, IMA announced at its annual meeting of members in Indianapolis a new updated competency framework. And these are the specific competencies that we believe all generations need to have and do have to some degree in order to upskill themselves in the face of automation. These skills and competencies include strategy management, data governance, data analysis, data visualization, tools and competencies that I mentioned earlier. These set of competencies and this framework brought to you by IMA will be out for a public exposure period of about 90 days. In the meantime, we're building courseware and delivering educational programs to help you understand the direction of technology, how to harness the power of technology, and quite frankly, to keep humans of all generations in control. You know, when you think about first mover, we often think about that from a market perspective, being a first mover on a new product into a market. So here's my thoughts relative to all of this evolving technology. You don't necessarily need to be, in my opinion, a first mover on every technology. Like, we must employ blockchain, we must employ robotics process automation, we must employ artificial intelligence. No, you don't have to. However, I do believe where you should be a first mover is in the learning aspect. Can blockchain be an enabler to my applications that involved distributed ledger and security? Can robotics process automation help to streamline some of my internal processes to free up customer service time, for example, to do less processing and more proactive selling? So we need to be first mover on how these technologies can enable better business performance, not necessarily on the technology itself. So in closing, I try to make the case here in a brief amount of time that foundational skills, foundational competencies stand the test of time for all generations, not just millennials and Generation X, but also not just to Generation Y and Generation Z, but also to Generation X and baby boomers. The critical importance for us as a profession and for professionals is to stay relevant and influential in the face of automation and to use automation as a competitive advantage. But to do so, we have to be in charge. We have to be critical thinkers. We have to be explorers. We need to discover answers in the data. We need to be inquisitive. We need to embrace a culture of challenge. And if we do those things, we will not only have a profession that is relevant and influential, but it could be even more relevant and influential and inspiring to not only millennials, but to all generations of professions to do our part for stronger organizations and a stronger society. Thank you.